extra, read all about it. Get your copies while they last. Stop the presses.
And now for something completely different.
Are you ready for a little truth? Are we not entertained? Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge and experience. There are no safe spaces here. The truth shall make you free. It's showtime! So you want the truth, but can you handle the truth? Well, here's another fine mess you've gotten us into. Now that's entertainment. Enlighten me a little. What you say is quite logical. And what did we learn? Prepare yourself for a little sensory overload. I came here for the truth. 47 years ago, stand by the roll show intro. Roll show intro in 3, 2, 1, go.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.
Hello, America, family, friends, and listeners all across this planet we call home. This is the Craig L. Hayes Show, and I am Craig L. Hayes. Today is the 1st of July, 2024, and we're going to do something a little different. We've had a couple monologues, I should say about a dozen monologues I've put online about the Constitution. Today, we're going to start another aspect of this show. It's going to be the interviews with people behind the scenes in showrooms and television and movies, etc. And today's first guest for the interviews, is going to be a good friend of mine I've known for almost 40 years. And his name is Mike Criswell. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Craig.
Well, it's good to have you here. Good to be with you again. And as I was talking a little bit about that, we're going to talk just a little bit and go in depth. And this interview is all about Mike and his experiences going through life in the show business and where he came from, his past, his most memorable times in entertainment, and what he's doing now. He's actually got a huge project I'd like him to talk about, and even as old as he is right now. Oh, come on, I'm just teasing.
Sure. You had to throw that in.
Yeah, just a little bit. But anyways, like I say, his name is Mike Criswell, good friend of mine. And we met up about 1988 working in a show called Splash. But we're going to get to that. At first, I want to get to his younger years and just talk to him about where he started, where he went to, where he was born, raised, went to school, and how he got into being a stagehand and what made him want to get into this crazy business we call showbiz. So, with that said, Mike, the floor is going to be yours. Where were you born? Where did you come from? What's some of your background a little bit?
Well, I was born in Modesto, California, 1947, March 11th specifically. Graduated from high school in 1965, Grace M. Davis. And after high school, I was like a lot of individuals. I had no clue what I wanted to do, we had a great childhood and, sports, this, that, and everything. And high school was great, but I just had no clue what I wanted to do. So after I graduated, my father was given a position with the Del Webb Corporation. He became transportation manager for the Sahara Tahoe, which was South Shore Lake Tahoe. I went to work starting as a dishwasher. And over the years, months, I progressed to, being in charge of the dishwashers. Then I became a runner. And then my father wanted me to become a parking attendant. He hired me to be a parking attendant. Why it took so long, I do not know. But that's kind of what happened. I think he was afraid of nepotism. But anyhow, one day when I was coming back from lunch as a parking attendant, I walked past the showroom and I noticed the doors were open and I was kind of curious, so I walked through the doors and a whole new world was laying in front of me. Laying. I sat down and I was watching. The proscenium was open. The side stage balconies were open, curtain-wise, etc. And I was watching all these guys run around. There was light pipes in, there was set pieces in, and they were doing all these things. And a little light went off, and I said, this looks like an interesting job. It's kind of like John Lennon when he first saw an Elvis Presley movie. He looked up at the screen, saw all the girls, all the adulation, and he said, this looks like a nice job. Same kind of situation, a scenario, if you will. So, long story short, I went to my father and I said, Dad, this theater work looks interesting. It should be prefaced that I went to a lot of shows with my family. We'd go to Harrah's at that time. Sahara wasn't built. We saw numerous stars, and we'd go to the dinner show. In those days, you had a dinner show at 8 o'clock, cocktails for 21 and over at midnight. So I had told him about my experience, what I saw, what I would like to do, etc. And he said, well, okay, if you want, I will go and have a little talk with the entertainment director on your behalf. So he went to Arvid Nelson. Arvid Nelson was the entertainment director, extremely talented, very nice guy, very, very, very just a guy that really went out of his way to
He knew the
help.
business.
He definitely knew the business, but his character and everything was, anyhow, not relevant per se. So he looked at me and he says, well, I tell you what, I've got an opening in the electrics department. If you want, I can hire you right now. And I said, no, I want to be a stagehand. Not knowing, but talk about being totally ignorant. I had the least amount of experience or ability was in carpentry. So he said, well, I can't use you now, but I tell you what, go to college and get some background, and next spring I'll hire you. So I went to Modesto Junior College for a year, learned the craft, etc., and I got called up it was about April 15th or so, whatever, and Arvid said, can you be here May 1st? Yes. Went to my instructors and told them that I was going to work for the Sahara Tahoe. And they said, what? And I said, I got to quit. I got to drop out because I have to be there May 7th. And they said, you're going to work at the largest theater restaurant in the world at the time. And I said, yeah. And they said, if you're going to do that, what we will do is we will pass you on all your classes.
Sweet.
Yeah. And they said, if you're going to go into professional theater on that magnitude or that scale, obviously you're going to be worthy of the credits that we're going to give you, etc. So I showed up May 1st, 1967, on the stage of the Sahara Tahoe. And I want to tell you, that was a humbling experience. It was massive. And it was intimidating because, like I said, I had a little bit of background, but people in those days were a little more naive and they were a little less mature. I was kind of like a 20-year-old with the mature level of 17 or so, And, I started in, mopping the decks and doing this and doing that and slowly acclimating into the stage life. And first year went by great. Learned a lot. The great crew. I should probably mention the crew because they were pivotal down my lifetime, throughout my career. But the crew was Larry Hildebrandt was head electric. Dana Pearson was spot operator, board relief operator, and John Stevens and Jerry Abraham. All of us eventually came to Local 720. I became a union member in 1968. In those days, we had the blackball admission, I can't remember what you want to call it, but if you got a black ball, you were not allowed to join the union. Every member had a white and a black ball. And if you got, I don't know if it was a percentage, I can't quite remember if you got one black ball or three or whatever out of it, whatever. Anyhow, I got all white black.
So the democratic process was they voted on you, and if there was too many black balls, nope, you didn't get in.
Yes,
Gotcha.
exactly.
Okay.
And so that got me established as a union member. October 1st, 1968, I took my oath with Al Dewey, another brother member. And what I'd like to interject here is the importance of a union. I made the mistake, and this is for all you young people that are considering coming into theater life, or even people that may have a background that want to join a union or theater. But there's a lot of important aspects about the pros and cons, union, non-union, and the brotherhood, if you will, is important. The networking is critical. These people that I just mentioned, along with Ron Kruger, Ken Wernstrom, Ed McDonald, and as I said, Al Dewey, all of us came down from the Reno Local 363 to Las Vegas in the 70s. Angelo Marino also. He came a little later. But the importance I'm trying to relate to all you individuals that are seeking is networking is critical. The people you meet, you don't know how important they may be down the line. All these individuals helped me throughout my career to one degree or another. So networking is critical. Friends are critical. Showing up, being responsible is critical. Knowledge, if you will. And I think that's one of the most important things that I think I could leave listeners, especially people that want to get into theater, especially young people that want to get into theater. Make friends and cherish them. I'm 77 years old now. I've had a wealth of professional experience, professional brothers and sisters, and a wealth of memories. Because at the end of your life, when you are retired, a lot of what you're going to be doing is thinking back about your experiences, what you did, who you did them with. So with that said,
And all those guys that you're talking about, I mean, they were everywhere here in Local 720. I mean, you couldn't go to a hotel or a big convention or something without bumping into one of those guys,
Well, that's true. I think there was speculation that the Tahoe Boys, as we were referred to in those days, was coming down to take over their Local 720.
You guys are scary.
Yeah, I tell you. We all got a chuckle out of it, to be quite honest.
Well, you should have. That's kind of just silliness on, but everybody gets paranoid because they want to have their own own deal. I mean, when all the guys came in from the Kansas City local, it was the same thing. Then Joe Mandel came in from Chicago and his group. You know, everyone got all paranoid that all these guys were coming in from other locals. It's a mixed local, and it's a mixed local from other locals. You know, so it's like the E pluribus unum, from many one. They came from all these other locals into ours, and we became one big strong union.
That's it. That's what they say about assimilating into, like the American culture, so to speak. Well, it's the same with unions. It's a bonding of all these different locals, their ideas, their abilities, their professionalism. It's what made Local 720 one of the strongest unions in the country.
Yep. Absolutely. So now you're here. Let's just go back up to Tahoe if we can.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your path? You started on the stage. You were there for a year or two, whatever you were doing, learning the craft. I mean, how weird was it to go from not knowing really anything about showbiz, and then next thing you're on a stage, and then you go to what was your specialty you wanted? What did you see in that showroom? I mean, I can tell you my thing that I always want to do, but here's about you. What was the thing you went, I want to do that? There's all these jobs. There's spotlight, there's electric, there's carpentry, there's flyman, there's rigging, there's projection, there's sound, there's monitor console. There's everything you can imagine in a showroom going on. After a year of doing everything on that stage and looking around, what was it you saw and went, I want to do that?
Well, the unique scenario and situation of being in Local 363 was, at the time, Sahara Tahoe and most of the hotels around the lake did not have union contracts. As such, I could and did go into all the departments. So I started on stage, learned about, terminology, how to do, the fly system, loading, this, that, and everything, blah, blah, blah. The next 3 years I spent in electrics. Now, while I was working on the deck, if we had a comic or, some easy kind of thing to where I wasn't really required to do anything on the deck, you had your free time while the entertainer was on, I would go up to the light booth and I would watch the spots and I'd see how they were doing. And they taught me. They said, this is the iris, this is your trombone, this does this, there's your shoppers, and in those days it was carbon arc. I'm probably one of a few. I'm not saying I'm hardly the only one, but I'm probably one of the few that can run a carbon arc.
There's a few of us.
Yeah, I figured there was. I wasn't going to sit there and say I was the only one.
Yeah, shortly after I did, I'm 62, so I'm 15 years younger than you. But that all went out, by 90, 92, 3, 4, somewhere in there. They got rid of all the carbon arcs. But I did that at the Sahara here in Las Vegas. Actually, they had carbon arcs. So
how many fingers did you burn?
Oh, you always burn your fingertips. You can't help but burn your fingertips changing out hot carbons, and trying to get it ready to go and do it in less than a minute or whatever you got to do, so.
Well, they respected my enthusiasm for wanting to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly I would follow an entertainer like a comic, basically a full spot, just following up, side to side, side to side, side to side. And then eventually I got to where they'd teach me how to, trombone on a certain thing, and this, that, get a little experience with the spot. So the next year, Larry asked if I would like to be a spot operator, which I said yes. And that's when I got into the electrics, learning all about, the instrumentation, the wattages, this, that, and everything. All it was, Sahara Tahoe at the time had the state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line light board. And it had movable scenes, cards, if you will. And it was mechanized. And you would have these cards that were probably about 16, 17 inches by about 5 or 6, and they're thin, 1 inch thickness. And these things would slide in and go down to the scene, whichever scene you were picking. It was a four scene board, and you could pick one, and then you'd have 3 others set for presets. And all these cards had sliders on them, and you would set your levels on these cards. And they were plastic, or if I remember right, plastic or metal, but I think they were plastic. And this big mechanism, and then as they're going in and out, and you just transfer from one scene to another, depending on et cetera, et cetera. But this thing was massive. It was a big bank. It was probably about 7 feet tall, and 20 feet wide, and like I said, divided into 4 banks. And that was how that's how they did their presets with respects to lighting. The patch bay, which was located on the stage floor, on the deck, was a huge complex of what was like telephone operator. It's 1/4-inch plugs, and you had all your dimmers listed, and you'd pull a plug out, and you'd take the plug from whatever instrument it was, and you patch it into the dimmers, et cetera, which was fed up to the light booth. It looked like some of those shows, it was just like a big spider's web cob, just lines going everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember doing that many times at the Las Vegas Hilton, at Caesars, and all the places had them here for a long time until digital came along.
Yeah, I should say I'm very much an analog dinosaur.
Me too. In a lot of ways, I am too.
I miss analog. I know everybody's computer orientated. Everybody's gotten, they've gotten into the digital such and everything. But I miss that hands-on. The feel of sound especially. So anyhow, here's a little story about Spotlight. The Sahara Tahoe, which was the same size. The Las Vegas Hilton was designed after the Sahara Tahoe. It was the same layout. It was basically taken. I think the only difference was the Hilton had a balcony. The Sahara didn't have the balcony. Seating-wise, it was probably 1,600, something like that, if I remember right. A big theater in those days. And they had 2 side spots, pods, and each pod had a trooper, carbon art trooper. So like I said, this was my second year in theater, my first year as electrics, and I just started running Spot. So they put me on the stage left pod, and I'm up there. And I've gone, I've been working for about a month or 2 or 3, whatever. And so this one night, probably about 4 months after, I come up to my booth, put the carbons in, fire it up, and you set your trim and all that, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sitting there, and I got my hand on the trombone, ready to iris in and all that and everything. And so I irised in, and I said, what the heck happened to the Spot? Where's my Spot? And I'm sitting there, and I was taking the front dowser, and I was going up and down, up and down. Where's my Spot? It's burning. What's wrong? Chop, 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 chop. Side shutter. Chop, chip. And Larry, he says, Mike, what the hell are you doing? I said, Larry, I haven't got any light. He said, sir, you're all over the stage. Larry, my light's not working. He said, what are you talking about? I said, Larry, I haven't got any light. So he comes running over to the side spot. And he's looking at me, and he says, "Your spot's out there, don't you see it?" I said, "Son of a gun." And I came back, and he says, "What the hell?" Well, what I didn't realize was they had cleaned the booth glass. I was used to seeing the spotlight reflect back from the dirt, and I'd see that spot, and it wasn't there. so I thought my spot wasn't working, and I got a big chuckle out of that. They call it, "Gee, Criswell, what's wrong with you?"
Well, so many stories like that with everybody. It's just and the audience doesn't know any better,
They knew.
Was it that obvious? Okay.
I mean, when you got this guy going tromboning way back and chop, 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 it was kind of, even in a bump stage, you kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah, early days of moving lights, huh? Just
Yeah, really.
robotics.
I enjoyed the electrics. I enjoyed the crew. We'd hang out at the bars after night, and you had to be kind of hardcore if you're going to be part of the crew. And there was peer pressure, not excessive, because I went right along with it. So every night after the show, we'd be out at the La Cantina bar, the Ready Room we used to call it, and they'd have shots of either tequila, Remy Martin, or whatever, and a beer back. And that actually is when I first started smoking too. I never smoked, and I was an athlete and all that good stuff, and that's where I picked up all these habits, drinking and carousing and womanizing and everything else that goes with it. But
Yeah, it's hard to believe that womanizing is in show business.
well, it's really not, but well, it really is.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
Thank God for women.
Yeah.
After the electrics experience, the sound engineer was Chris Adams. Chris Adams was a hell of a nice guy, talented up the gazoo. This guy knew sound and engineering, and he was such a nice guy. He got cancer, and he asked me. He said, "Do you have an interest in sound?" I said, "Yeah, actually," which I did. I won't go into the whole aspect of that, but playing guitar and music and all that stuff. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you like to learn how to be a mixer and learn sound?" I said, "Sure." And the Sahara Tahoe had, in the center of the room, engineered soundboard. I think it was 24 tracks, channels, if you will. And this was big time for that era. You remember, this is it's probably 69, 70 by this time. And so Chris taught me mixing, input, everything about what I needed to know to be a good engineer. Fortunately, I had a good set of ears. I was known for my mixing ability and such. And that was so memorable. There's some things that I think that I was the first, or one of the first, if not the first, but when I mixed sound, usually engineers would preset and bring up individual, spots and stuff, piano solo, guitar solo, sax solo, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But I rode the emotions of sound. And what I would do is, like, we had Ray Conniff, we had Henry Mancini, we had various acts that had, Elvis Presley and Margaret, I would ride the levels, and I would boost the gains on the ends of the crescendos and such like that. And everybody, even the entertainment director at that time was Pat French, and so he goes, Stuart Allen. And he comes back, he says, "Mike, what's going on here?" He says, "This is so dynamic." I said, "That's just the way I engineer sound." He says, "That's incredible," et cetera. But that's what I was doing, was I was writing the emotions of sound. And the other thing I think with respects to sound is later on when I came down to Las Vegas, I was head sound at the Desert Inn and head sound at the Frontier Hotel. I was given an opportunity by Juliet Prowse to take her show to South Africa. And what I think I'm one of the first, because I had all these English texts and everything saying they'd never heard of anybody doing anything of this nature. But I did schematics of everything. The band layout, microphone layout, speaker array layout, board layout. And I submitted all these schematics, if you will, rough schematics, and submitted them to them before we arrived in South Africa. And they were just totally, totally impressed with that. They'd never heard of anybody doing something like that, and they told me how it expedited them and made them a little more at ease. You know, they weren't so afraid of what was going to, what to anticipate and how to plan for everything. So those are the couple of things that I kind of pat my back on. After sound, I went, I did a little bit of stint in the lounge, which was a one-man operation. It was a little trooperette. It had curtain control, one main curtain, and it had probably 10 or 12 microphone inputs, channels, and a 10-board preset. It went from, 1 through 10, and there were presets. You could go back and forth between, pink, blue, amber, full up, etc.
Yeah, those one-man operations, you're running sound, light, spot, everything. You do it all by yourself. Yeah, I know that feeling very well.
But it was fun.
Oh, it's a blast. People don't realize how much fun lounges are.
Yeah.
They are so much fun to work in. I want to just go back just a little bit and talk about the Desert Inn. Now, we have a common friend, family member, whatever you want to call it, in the entertainment director at the Desert Inn, which was my cousin Bonnie.
Sweetheart of all sweethearts.
Yeah, she was there, and just, one of the only female entertainment directors, that's ever been in that position for the longest time.
True.
And that was back in, what part of the 70s was that?
Well, I started in 73 at the Desert Inn, and I left in 77.
Yeah.
So it was during that period.
And a lot of people don't realize that she was actually engaged at one time to Frank Sinatra Jr.
Hell,
it didn't work out, and they went their separate ways, but...
Hell, I think everybody that met Bonnie wanted to be engaged to her.
Yeah, she was beautiful, smart, she was wonderful.
You just can't emphasize beauty and intelligence enough. She had the whole thing, charming. She had the whole package. Speaking of nepotism, one of your uncles was working at the DI when I was there.
Gilbert, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Gilbert, it was interesting. Gil was the Hayeses that I have met have been incredible people. I haven't met the whole family, but I've met a goodly number of them. And Gil and I became close. He did sound and he did deck, and et cetera, et cetera. But when Gary Nellis was the head sound, I was running spot when I first got there, on the crew. I was running spot. And Gary needed a relief, so he made me his relief sound engineer. And I would relieve him up until January, I think it was 74, when the MGM opened up. I think it was January 74. He gave his notice and went to the MGM, and Randy asked me if I wanted the position. And I said, well, he says, well, it's between you and Gil. I said, he says, I'm not sure, but Gil has the first right. I said, well, whatever, And Gil, I don't know, I'm not sure if he was up to that magnitude of running that kind of board. I'm sure he might have been. I really don't know per se. But he opted out. You know, I think he sincerely saw me as a young, up and coming type individual. And like I say, we were good friends. You know, we talked a lot and everything. So I think he kind of gave me that position, which I was grateful for. And I spent, since 74 to 77 at the Desert Inn. And we had a little trouble with the union. Harold Ritzer was the business agent. Hal Ritzer. And Randy wanted me in that position. Well, Hal wanted one of his own people that he wanted to put in that position. And Randy said, no, Micah's going to be the sound engineer. And that didn't set well with Hal. So he kept me from joining the union until 1976, or becoming a 720 member. Obviously, I was union and then transferred, so et cetera, et cetera.
He just blocked your transfer, basically.
Basically,
Yeah.
And over the years, we got over it. You know, Hal and I. You know, I respected Hal. Hal was, you know, he was a talent. You know, he did
Great business agent. One of the best business agents 720 ever had.
Couldn't agree more. You know, we just had that little oomph, you know, but I understood where he was coming from.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but the thing was, I was awfully good at what I did, and Randy knew it. And that ended that conversation, you know. So anyhow, I did, you know, like I said, 4 years or whatever at the DI. What was interesting at that time was we had acts, and then the DI, or actually Hughes, came up with this thing that they wanted. You know, we had Debbie Reynolds, Juliet Prowse, and Bobby Gentry. And what we did for maybe a year or two, was they would each rotate. They would do a month, then Juliet come in, do a month, Bobby. Then Debbie came back, did a month, Juliet, Bobby, blah, blah, blah. For that whole year and a half, 2 years, however long it was. And I mentioned before going to South Africa with Juliet, doing her audio. That's where I met my wife, future wife. God, what a knockout. Gee, Christmas. You talk about wanting to go on the road. That's a good reason. You meet all kinds of interesting girlies.
Yeah, South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some beauties there. But anyhow, I kind of digressed a little bit there.
That's okay. Renee's an awesome woman, you know.
She was.
Yeah.
I sure miss her. Yeah, she passed. We didn't divorce, by the way.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Yeah. For the listeners, yes. And she actually liked me. I don't know what was wrong with her, but she actually liked me. So
what can you say about taste?
No,
some women have it, some don't. Anyhow, so see, after I had worked every position at Lake Tahoe, because the union didn't have a contract, et cetera, so I could go through the departments, and each one taught me. You know, I learned carpentry, a little bit about carpentry, electrics, and sound, and one-man operation where you did everything. So when I came down from Tahoe to Las Vegas, I was pretty much entrenched, which is now for all you youngers that are out there listening, one thing you need to understand, along with, you know, networking with friends, et cetera, probably the most important thing you can do is get as many cards as you can from the union.
yeah, explain the cards, because that's something they probably don't quite understand. And it's skill cards is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's, you know, like I said, there's the skills are carpentry, electrics, sound, there's head sound, assistant sound, et cetera. Then there's audio visual, which is what we used to call the golden goose card. It's the card that keeps on giving.
Oh yeah.
A great card to have. But anyway, you get your first call when you go out and work an 8-hour call. Then you can take these classes in whatever category you want. There's, I mean, Craig can probably list all the, different positions and stuff. And
Well, I could list a bunch, but there's no way to list all of them because I can't remember all of them. Because I mean, you have stuff. Because when we used to, build all the shows in the shops have 20 different places. Different cards in just the shops. Layout carpenter, construction carpenter, welder, fabricator. Fiberglass or scenic. I mean, they just go on and on and on those cards. And then you have, on the stage where you and I have spent basically our entire life. You have your three major heads, your head carpenter, your head electric, your head audio, and then under them there's, anywhere from 4 to a dozen cards underneath each one of those. So,
assistants.
yeah. And even heads of departments, like we're doing, if you're a head carpenter, the whole stage is under you. But your direct people that are underneath you are like the head flyman, head props, assistant carpenters, all these different things that go on. And audio, the same thing, assistant audios, A2s, et cetera, et cetera. Electrics have spots, special effects, water, pyro, all that goes under electric. So there's so many different things you can get into and learn. In the flyman, you have the rigging, you have so many things you can just get into and make one heck of a living if you'll put some time into it.
And effort.
And just get in there and just learn everything you can so you can work as much as you can. But anyways, sorry. I wanted to clarify that a little bit for anybody listening, just what there is.
Yeah. It's so diverse. And another good thing about theater is you're working primarily indoors. There are calls that are outside. Don't get me wrong. You could be doing, you're setting up stages, trusses and all this, etc. And it could be outdoor work, but primarily everything is indoors. And the other good thing about a union is you can diversify so much, as previously stated, but I just had a brain fart.
It's okay. Well, you can diversify, but I always tell people diversify, know as much as you can, but then specialize.
Exactly. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is the more cards you attain, the more you work. And that is valuable in and amongst itself because it works on a rotation system. So you go out and let's say you have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 cards, electric, sound, et cetera. Well, you go out on an electric call and you go down to the bottom of the list on that, but your other cards are going up. So the more cards you have, the more you work. And there's also ASAPs, which are extremely valuable if you are disciplined. An ASAP call is you've got to be ready, tools in hand. When they call, you got to be able to show up within probably 15, 20 minutes to a half hour or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as possible. That is a valuable little thing to be. But you got to be really disciplined to do a bounce or an ASAP call.
Yeah, the way I look at that is you can't spend your time partying. You can't live your life partying and then go, oh, yeah, man, I can get there. I got to go home, grab my tools and clothes and get changed and showered, and then I'll head over. No, it doesn't work that way. It's like call you up. If you're on the ASAP list, it's like, I need you here in 20 minutes. Okay, I'll be there on my way. My tools are already in the car. I'm already got my clothes in the car. I'm ready to go. I'm gone. Bye.
That's it.
And those guys that show up all the time on ASAPs, the same, there's not hundreds of them that do that. There's dozens that will show up on ASAP calls, but they work all the time because they're always getting an ASAP call and they run right to it. So it's like you can make a living just doing ASAP.
We had a member, Ivor. Ivor we dubbed the king of the 4-hour calls.
Mm-hmm.
Ivor was a gentleman's gentleman. He was English, a real gentleman's gentleman. He was a magician. He liked to do little magic stuff here and there. But Ivor was kind of, he just didn't quite have the background of theater per se. But we'd always, do the mopping, the sweeping, laying out cables, explaining how we wanted something done. He was really good at all that, and he made a killing.
Yep.
On those, he would do one 4-hour call, go to the next 4-hour call, and then after that do a third 4-hour call. He was making more than a lot of, in-house full time.
Yeah, exactly.
So anything is possible.
Yep.
It just depends on how motivated you are, how disciplined you are, and how professional you are. And the main thing is, once you get into calls, avoid individuals that will bring you down, that want to talk, that want to drink coffee or whatever, that hang around the tables, that bullshit and don't want to work.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pay close attention to your heads, keep close to your heads or the people that he puts in charge, and bust thy butt. Because those are the people that they look for and that will be called back regularly. Very important.
I used to teach the class for the new people coming into 720. People who've just gone through the class and at the hall, and now they're ready to go out and get some live experience and take a look in a showroom. We'd have them come into our showroom there at the Las Vegas Hilton, now the Westgate. And I'd start off, and there'd be sometimes anywhere from 10 to 30 of these people coming into 720. And I would start the conversation and tell them, okay, so if you believe that tomorrow, now that you've passed all your classes and you're now signed up in 720 and you can go out on a call, that you're going to start making $60,000, $70,000 a year, you're hallucinating. Said you're going to start making a call here and a call there, and exactly what you just said: be available, stay close to the heads, stay close to them. And then I'd also tell them this: don't try to impress me. Don't try to impress any of these other guys that are here. These guys have got major experience in this stuff. And how you are going to impress them, you're not going to impress any of us by coming up with some marvelous new idea that no one's ever heard of, because I'll guarantee you we've been there, done that 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
But how you can impress us, and you're going to be called back, is showing up on time, which means 15 minutes early, showing up ready to work, a good attitude, and as soon as I give you a project, you go finish it, and as soon as it's done, you come back and say, it's finished. What do you want next? That will impress me.
That's imperative.
Yeah.
That is probably the best advice you could probably get. There's just, and the doors will open up. But I tell you, if you're lazy, if you want to sit by a water cooler and drink water and bull, shoot the bull with everybody, you won't be called back. You'll be called back if the hall's depleted.
Yep. You'll get an open call there. That's about all you'll get.
Yeah. So it's imperative. Have that, that don't expect a paycheck. I showed up, therefore I am owed. I mean, if you got a mentality like that, don't get in theater. Don't work. I mean, why bother?
Yep.
That's one thing about my era and Craig's. It's a whole different mentality. It's like the union was everything. Everybody supported the union. And, I probably have done 15 or 20 strikes up in Tahoe, Reno specifically. We struck the Pioneer Theater. We struck the convention centers multiple times. A few hotels here and there and everything. I'll tell you one thing, and a little story about, we were doing the Pioneer Theater, which was a domed theater. There's like a whole city block that this theater sat on, and we were picketing. So we had, 20 or 30 of us, but it was like we were scattered, in groups of twos. And we would augment. We had fire department personnel and police personnel, which we would use if the hall was depleted and we needed extra help. We would ask the fire department guys and the police if they wanted to make extra money and do a theater thing, which they did. So we had full support of of these professionals.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good idea.
Yeah. And like I said, I emphasized the hall was depleted and they needed the help, putting in a show or, unloading trucks, et cetera, et cetera. So this one night, we were doing our little things, probably 7, 8 o'clock at night, and we were going around and around, and me and, his name's Tom Cudmore, we were walking, and we were probably 20, 30 yards behind was Dana Pearson, and this pickup stopped, and we got the scab, They were criticizing us for being union, wanting contracts, etc. We weren't scabs. I want to emphasize that.
No.
And they were just giving us a bad time. Well, they jumped out and they ganged us. There was like 4 or 5 of them. They ganged us. And to Dana Pearson's credit, all I remember was here comes Dana yelling, and he had his sign, and and it was one of the cops too. And they laid into these guys, and they were running by the time they got to us. We got punched out a little bit, but that's kind of what strikes are all about. You don't expect that, but it can happen. 79, the strike of 79 here in Las Vegas, and 84, especially 84, was it was a pretty. Well, it got to be harrowing, and there was a lot of things that happened. But I remembered I was working at the Frontier, so I had to pick at the Frontier, which meant going from the Las Vegas Strip down to Industrial, across, and down the fashion show thing there, whatever that street was. And like I said, we're thin. But the thing I remember about the strikes of 84 is the heat.
Yeah.
God almighty, it was like 105. And you're walking and you're walking and you're walking. It's not what you want. You never want to get into a strike, especially in the summer or winter. It's not fun.
No.
But it was what was needed. It happened, and we got our rights, and we got we got a good contract. But that's what it took, about 2 or 3 months walking in 105-degree heat.
And you said it. That's what it takes sometimes to get that, and you got to go sacrifice it. And you got to support other unions, too. I've walked over the convention center a couple times with the Teamsters. Just walk the picket line with them, sign in, go grab a sign, walk for an hour or 2 with them, and you got to work together if you're going to get a good contract, and everyone wants a good contract. So,
yeah, that's what it takes. And I know a lot of people just, they would. Well, actually, no. As I said about our generations, our generation and Craig's generation, we were pretty much disciplined. We had that, not to use it, frivolously, but we had that professional desire to show the strength of what a union is. Not only stagehands, but, the Teamsters, the electricians, the culinary and such. And we showed this town exactly what a unified labor movement can do.
Yep.
That's why it's so important to understand the background of where a union came from. And, you go back to the 20s, way back, whatever, etc. A lot of it wasn't pretty. But that's what it takes. And what I'm trying to tell all you young people who may be union members now or want to become union members is don't take your union for granted. That's one of the worst things you can do. Because as easy as it is to get, it's also easy enough to lose.
And in reality, in our local has lost a lot of ground over the last 30 years. You know, 'cause they keep on not closing up the hotels that we have contracts in and blowing them up and building a bigger, brand new casino. So we've lost a lot of ground on that area, and you know, but the hotels learned we don't have to have 720 if we take and we pay the same wages, benefit packages, and stuff like this. So to me, in some ways, even the union 720 has done its job by making a standard wage across the industry, especially on the strip. Now you have the off-property ones, the Boyd places and stuff like that. They pay their guys less and don't take care of them as well. But at the same time, you know, on the strip and stuff like that, in other hotels, those guys are making as much, if not even more, by the hour, so they don't have to deal with the union. So we've done our job in some ways, you know, by bringing up a standard of wages and such.
There's another interesting thing about the union over the non-union as far as comparisons. If a non-union guy loses his job, where does he go? He doesn't have a union, you know, to go back to that is basically an employee, you know, a human resources, you know, like et cetera, et cetera.
A labor pool, a labor hall, whatever you want to call them, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a non-union guy, he's got to hit the streets. He's got to go to human resources. He's got to convince, you know, human resources that I'm valuable, et cetera, you know. He's got to prove himself that he's worthy of a position, et cetera, et cetera. And not that he isn't. He probably is qualified such. But what is it like when you, as a union individual, calls up and say, put my cards back in. I'm not working at such and such hotel anymore. Could you please put my cards back in?
Yep.
And wait by the phone for them to call you, which they will, and you're not out beating the streets, hopefully trying to get a job.
Yep. Absolutely. You know, that's the benefit of having a hiring hall. It's just, yeah, you can sign into it, and you don't have to go down to all these other hotels and put in your apps and get interviews and stuff. So there's benefits there. Absolutely.
And hope that they hire you.
Yeah.
You're hired when you're in a union. You are hired. It's just a matter of time waiting for those calls with all those cards that you may attain. And not to be redundant, but the more cards and more categories that you are qualified for, the more you are going to work. And the harder you work, the more you will work.
Exactly how it works. So now we've gone into the 70s with you.
Couple of fun stories.
Yeah, we got some stories there. You got, I know you went to the Frontier after that, and that's when you met up with, was it Roy Clark? Started working with him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some stories between Juliet Prowse and all these other ones, and then you have some Roy Clark. What's a good Juliet Prowse story? I mean, not just her taking you down to South Africa and meeting your future wife, but you know, a show working with her. I always thought she was just so attractive and just
legs up the gazoo.
Oh man, just so good looking. You know.
You know what's amazing about entertainers and showbiz people in general is they are really, really likable people. You know, entertainers, you know, especially if you're working in theater and you're working around them, almost all of them are very, very congenial and, you know, talk, you know, hi, you know, they'll talk with you as people. I got to go back to Tahoe for a minute for a couple of stories.
Good, let's go.
We had Elvis Presley and Anne Margaret, as I stated. I got to talk to Elvis. That was one of my biggies. But I was 20. No, actually, I was about 23. It was 1970, so I was 23, and I was the kid on the crew. So obviously he had his own sound engineers, et cetera, et cetera. But he would rehearse for 2 weeks in the convention center at the Sahara, to work out the bugs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I used to take his RE15 or RE16 mic. That's the only ones he would use. And I'd take it into the convention center and give it to him. And I'd sit there and he'd go, "Hey, Mike, how's it going?" I said, "Really good." He says, "You're the youngest on the crew, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." "You're the kid." I said, "Yeah, I'm the kid."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Thank you, Elvis." He says, "Call me E." And I tell you, I felt, I get to call Elvis E. That was quite something, because not everybody got to call Elvis E, which I found out. But anyhow, he was such a nice guy.
Just for giving his mic, you get to call him me.
I get to call me, and because I was
Nice.
the kid. I was really, I was very personable. That's one thing that was greatly in my favors. I had a very good nature about myself. And the other thing, let me interject here while it's in my head. As you're working and looking, for jobs, et cetera, and you're going through everything, one thing to try to keep in the back of your mind, know your limitations. Don't try to be something you're not. Be at or below your level. The more you progress, the greater the level. But don't try to supersede your level, because you'll only make a fool out of yourself. And that's bad in itself.
Yes.
So anyhow, about this time, too, we had Anne Margaret. And I don't know how many people out there remember the tragic incident involving Anne. But she was on a set piece. And this is gospel truth. I was probably the same age, 23. I'm 72 now, so I could have been 25 or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was on the deck my last year. Anyhow, Anne Margaret she had this opening number called After Midnight. And they were all in these costumes, like an owl, a dog, a coyote, various creatures, headpieces. And it was Eric Clapton's After Midnight and such. Well, she was on this set piece. And what it looked like was a giant hand. It was probably 6 feet long and about 3 feet wide, a stoop that she stood on. And we would fly this stoop above the curtain, out of sight. And on cue, she would come in on this hand, get off the stoop, and proceed to the opening. Well, this one night, and what I would like to impress and tell you is that this set piece that we had made for her was a giant cutout of a hand with the thumb extended up. On that thumb was a little handhold thing, and she'd hold on to that and stood on the set piece. In my presets, I had to do a circular thing going from stage right to stage left, and then I crossed back over center stage to stage right. Well, the night of the incident, let me preface once again, the stoop was married. There were 2 pipes. The stoop was married together with the hand, so it worked in conjunction, one thing. But it was 2 pipes, 2 separate pipes. Anyhow, I looked up, I'm kind of watching as I was crossing the stage. I was about 20, 30 feet from her at the very most, probably about 20. And I just looked up at her because, and the set piece is rocking. And I'm sitting there going, that's not good. Why is she doing that? And it got going, and it got going, and it got going. And finally, it went too far. And the set piece separated. The stoop went left. The hand piece went right. Anne was heading head first into the deck from 20, 25 feet, 23 feet.
Somewhere up there, yeah.
Yep. She had this huge cape on, a sequined gown, etc. Two things saved her life that night. One was a stagehand named Charlie Manchester. He really saved her. But the other thing was that cape, when it bellowed out, that thumb came and hit the cape and flipped her on her side as opposed to going head first. If she would have gone head first, I don't even think Charlie could have saved her.
No, she's probably going to be dead.
Yeah. So anyhow, the cape flipped her on her side. She's heading down. Charlie broke her fall. And bam, she hit pretty hard. And it was like, you see, the opening act, the comedy, Charlie Brill and Mitzi and Charlie Brill were doing their comedy routine. And they had just were taking their final bows when this happened. And they were just starting to come through the curtain. And that was when there's crack. Boom. And for what seemed like eternity, I know people say that a lot, it seemed like forever, it was total silence. There was not a sound. Black stage, and then all of a sudden one of her backup singers screamed her head off. I can still hear her screaming. So I went to my aunt. I was the first one, actually. Charlie went, and I think he went to get, I was probably looking for help for ambulance or something like that. And what surprised me was you would expect to see trauma. But like I said, she was heading on her shoulder and such, so she didn't impact, I don't think she impacted her head. She did damage, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But there was just a little bit of blood on her right cheek, I think it was, or right by her mouth, the corner of her mouth. That's all I saw. And now, after, it took about 20, 25 minutes for the ambulance. I ran out front trying to get a medical, I was screaming my head off, and the Treniers were in the audience. They were saying, "Hey, Pee Wee, what are you doing?" Everybody thought it was a joke. And I'm screaming, "Is there a doctor in the house?" This, that, and everything. Well, there's two medics, emergency EMTs, they call them nowadays. They were in the audience. I said, "Come back," because there was no doctors. And they're looking, it was out of their league. And they were saying, "Well, you're going to get an ambulance." And they carted her off and everything. But she survived. Thank God she survived. Roger Smith flew in, had his private plane, flew in the next day, et cetera, et cetera. And thank God she was okay. That was the main thing. True story.
How was she as a person?
Sorry?
How was she as a person?
Oh, like I said, she was marvelous.
Yeah, she always had that feel about her. Because you get a read on people when you're in the business long enough, you can tell pretty easy, oh, they're going to be kind of hard to work with, or they're going to be wonderful and stuff like that. To my read on her was always a class act, lady, good to work with, knew what she wanted to do, and worked hard to get there, but knew that just doing the class act thing would get her farther than being, like so many of them get hard-nosed on stuff, and it's like unnecessary,
Yeah, what's ironic is Juliet Prowse and Anne Margaret, amongst others, were in Elvis Presley movies. Little FYI, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, I think Anne Margaret was the female Elvis Presley of the time.
She even had a motorcycle number. I just remembered that. Yeah, she had a motorcycle, big Harley. She'd drive it off stage. And Brett dressed in leather. She was so cute.
That was a good look. Yeah, that'd be a good look for her. Well, good. So now let's come on back down to Vegas.
Okay.
And let's
back to Roy.
We can go to anything else in the Desert Inn that you remember as far as just significant shows you did there that were, Desert Inn was such a beautiful showroom, and that stage, the backstage area, everything was so amazing. It was just so much room on that. And, what act did you see or work that, besides Juliet Prowse, Debbie Reynolds, what was the acts that you would go, wow, that was an honor, a privilege to work that one, and it was just amazing performance and show.
Bobby Gentry.
Bobby Gentry, good one.
Bobby Gentry. This was, like I said, what was this? This is probably 75 now. 75. She was doing Sergeant Pepper's. She had a whole thing, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Sergeant Pepper, Getting Better, all these songs. And she had costumes, the whole, her backup dancers and singers and everything, They were, it's just incredible. And made Star Drop, with the limited technology we had in those days as far as, dry ice. And I used to, speaking of Bobby, I used to have to load this flash powder. We had fuses, the old fuses that you used to screw in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd cut the center out. Randy showed me how to do this. You got to remember this for the days of pyro and licensing and everything, special effects. Oh. And I cut out the plastic top on the fuse, and you put gunpowder,
Yeah.
and you'd screw it into a light fixture on the deck. It had rondelles in the deck. They were all over the stage. There was color gels in them, and it was a special effect and everything. So, and then you'd take the rondelle out so that it was open, and on cue you'd poof, it was like a little puff of smoke and everything. Well, Bobby kept telling Randy, "That's not enough. It doesn't look like it's not." And Randy kept saying, "Bobby wants more." So I packed the thing. And I should say they took the clear rondelle out, and they had a metal rondelle with holes in it. That's where the puff smoke come out of. And she wanted to see more. And these plates probably weighed about 3 or 4 pounds, I guess. It was pretty heavy, And she wants more. Well, okay, she wants more. I'll give her more. I packed that damn fuse. Kaboom! that metal rondelle shot up almost to the grid. Not the grid, but the ceiling. There was a overhang of the stage and such. She says, "Mike, I think that's a little too much." Okay, Bobby, we'll cut it back.
Tone it down just a little bit.
A little bit. Boom, clunk. We're lucky we didn't hit somebody in the audience or something.
Or, anybody at all on stage, etc.
Really. But those were the days, there was so much, you had to make things. A lot of, we didn't have the luxury of computers and all this, that, and everything, or, some of the, whatever they use nowadays, I mean, we had to make things.
Yeah.
And if it didn't work, you used duct tape and you used Velcro.
Or bicycle pumps, or
Oh, yeah, geez, don't go with the bicycle pump.
whatever it takes to get this show on. So that's your Desert Inn experience.
Yeah.
Now, why did you leave the Desert Inn to go to the Frontier, which is just across the street?
Todd Dougal and I worked together. Todd Dougal had been head fly assistant and became head fly, I believe, or assistant fly, whatever. But Randy told Suma, like entertainment, that Todd's ready to be a stage manager. So Todd was given the position. There was some controversy regarding, I can't remember his name, the stage manager at the Frontier at the time. I can't remember his name, but there was some whatever going on, but they fired him. Made Todd Dougal the stage manager. Well, Todd was having trouble. All the entertainers were having trouble because like I said, Bobby, Juliet, and they went to the Frontier too because it was part of Suma. It was back and forth between these two properties. And they were having trouble with sound. They didn't like this, that, and everything. So Todd let go, the sound guy, and brought me over. And that's how I went to the Frontier. That was in April of '77.
So basically, you had spoiled some of these acts and performers, whatever, and
I couldn't work. When I first started, Debbie, then Juliet, then Bobby. No, I want Mike. Nobody else can do my sound. Juliet, I want Mike. Nobody else can do my sound. Bobby, Mike, nobody else can do my sound. I worked for I think it was 9 months without a day off. And because, I had, Randy, we were doing, there was nothing, the convention area was, minimal. But I had to come in on certain days at 10 a.m. and help him do some setups of mics and this, that, and everything.
and still do an 8 p.m. and a 12 midnight show.
Exactly. Exactly. And I tell you, by the end of that 9 months or whatever it was, I remember Debbie, she says, Randy, get Mike out of here. Give him a day off. He's getting squirrely. He's getting real squirrely.
But that's the business, and we don't see that much anymore today.
No.
But
No.
back in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that, you did 6 nights of shows. You would do the loadout on the 6th night of the show, during a week. The next day you were in on your day off, loading in the next show, and you did 6 more nights of shows. You never got out of these places.
No.
You lived in them,
You made good money.
but you had no life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the way it kept going, and you end up with no wife.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, that's what happens to us.
Yeah.
Show business, as I've said in the book, Showtime, is a hard mistress to live with, demands everything all the time.
And you had the mentality, the show must go on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it was entrenched, instilled, and you just acted upon it, reacted, whatever word you want to use. You just did it, and I was young enough. I didn't, it wasn't like I'm older now and everything, but in those days I was full of piss and vinegar, and so it was just like, well, it was just part of your mentality.
Yeah.
You didn't question it. Okay, you want me to work 7 days a week for you? Fine, I'll do it, because I really loved the girls, Juliet and Bobby and everything. They were really something. Bobby Gentry asked me out.
She asked you out?
Yep. Randy calls up and says, Mike, Bobby wants to talk to you about the show. Okay, this is after the second show. So I go in the dressing room. She says, Mike, we need to talk. Okay, you want a beer? Yeah. Gave me a beer. We're sitting there talking. She's in her little nightgown, or her dressing gown. And she's talking about the show, about the mics, about something. I'm sitting there going, well, you can talk to me about this anytime. I said, what's wrong, Bobby? Is something you're not hearing or something? Oh, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I said, what? She goes, Mike, I was just wondering, do sound men ever ask entertainers out? And I kind of went,
What?
Wait a minute. Mike, you're fantasizing here.
Yeah.
You got to be fantasizing here. I mean, I've dated a lot of beautiful girls and cocktail waitresses and models. It's blah 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 blah. Never had an entertainer ask me out. Backup singers, yeah, all that good stuff. But an entertainer? And I said, what? And she says, yeah. Does sound engineers ever ask entertainers out? And I said, well, I don't think so. I don't know. She says, well, think about it. I said, oh, God, Bobby. And I said, well, now the irony is I was getting married next Saturday to my second wife.
Ah.
And, of course, I had a conscience. And I said, God, Bobby, I'd love to go out with you, but I'm getting married next Saturday. And she said, oh, God. Well, I respect that, Mike. I would expect nothing less. And I said, Jesus. The sad part was I was divorced from her 4 months later. She got a little squirrely.
Mm. A lot of squirrels around, huh?
I tell you. Oh, God, show business. You got to love it.
No, and that's the thing. You have to love it if you're going to do it, and you have to be a part of it, and it's going to consume your life. You know, and and that's just what it is. It will consume your life, especially if you're just going in just to run a spot or you're just coming. It's not going to consume your life. You're going to have plenty of time. You're going to do what you want. But if you get into a position like head sound, like you were, front of house mixing guy, or monitor guy, or the head electric, or the head carpenter. Head carpenter being what I've done for 30 years now. It consumes your life. You're going to be at the whim of anything going on in that place, and you've got to be available and always there. End of story. There's no, if you can fit this into your schedule, can you come by? No, it's like be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
It's
That's what it is, you know.
Yep.
And people don't get that. They think that the magic they see on stage just happens. Well, if that's what they believe, we did our job right.
That's true.
So,
Yep. I just can't think of a more rewarding career. But like I said, it took me to Africa. It took me to China. It took me all over the East Coast, Canada. A number of places. Doing tours with some of these entertainers and such and everything. And that's just part of the the icing on the cake, so to speak. It's you get paid and you get to go travel. You get to see some of the world. I met my wife, 12,000 miles away. So anything and everything can happen when you work in theater.
yeah.
It just depends on how bad you want to be and how much you want to achieve. It's a very personable thing. Personable thing.
Well, yeah, you have to decide what is your limit. How far are you going to go? How far do you want to take this? If you're going to have a family per se, very difficult to do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I never went and toured. I never went on the road. I never did anything like that, and still I didn't do that good of a job having my first wife and the kids. So it's just not the touring that's messes you up. It's the business, and you can sacrifice a lot, and that's just what it is. But let's go back to the frontier. Tell me about Roy Clark. I know that's one of the guys you started touring with too. I mean, you got to work with a lot of guys over there. Some of you saw old faces, but then you got to be around some new faces.
Oh gosh, Roy was an incredible entertainer. I loved the guy to death. He was like a second dad to me. He was like my dad. My dad obviously wasn't a musician or anything of that magnitude, but the natures, their attitudes and everything. My dad was very intelligent. I didn't take advantage of his intelligence and his wisdom. But I listened to Roy, but I wish I could tell you some of the stories, but I just can't.
No, there's stuff that's personal and stuff that's
Yeah, nothing bad. Like I don't know, you leave everybody thinking, oh, they had orgies and no, nothing like that. But we pushed the limit, but we didn't get into that kind of thing. But Roy is such a he'd say, Mike, I got this road date coming up, and I need you. We're having problems at these Green Bay and such. He says, can I? He asked Todd. Todd says, sure, take off. But I would fly into Tulsa, and Roy would come and pick me up at the airport. This is like 79, 80. This is before the paparazzi and the crowds.
Yeah.
He'd meet me at the gate, and he would, walk me through the airport.
But he was like royalty anyway
totally.
in Tulsa, man. He was
Totally.
he was like, no one swarmed him, I don't think, and no one acted crazy. He was just one of the guys, but they knew who he was, and they respected him, and they gave him his space, and
Exactly. And, well, this one time I flew in to do this tour. Barbara was with him. Barbara was his wife. And he met me at the airport, and we took my stuff and all that, and we're driving back on this main road in Tulsa. I have no idea what it's called. It's like 4 or 5 lanes, one of these big major artery things. And Roy had a green light. And we go through the intersection, and here comes this dude doing probably 45, 50 or whatever, and he slammed into the driver's side, Roy's side. And Roy had this massive pickup. It was a heavy-duty pickup. And this guy slammed into us, and I went right into the passenger window. Barbara went, forward and kind of hurt her neck a little bit, if I remember right, a little bit. And Roy got shooken up and everything. Well, after we kind of calmed down a little bit, and, of course there's a little bit of a crowd, everything kind of shut down a little bit, a few people. And so I got out, and Roy got out, and we're kind of looking, and all of a sudden this guy's just going, "You dumb son of a bitch, it was all your fault, oh God, who the hell do you think, don't you have eyes, can't you see?" Then he looked up and saw who it was. He says, "Oh my God, I just hit Roy Clark. Oh my God." And the guy was crying. I mean, he was literally just like bawling practically. He said, "Oh my God, Roy, I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. And so the cops come, of course, then there's a crowd and this, that, and everything, and milling around, and da-da-da-da. Well, long story short, Roy got the police to just forget it, basically. And I'm not too sure, but I think he covered the guy's car to have it fixed. I think. I'm almost certain he did.
That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, that was Roy. He was the nicest guy. We would be in, doing, when we was on the road, I came in one night. I had an adjoining suite because the truck driver or the bus driver got waylaid. The bus was blah, blah, blah. Something happened to it. So I got the suite that he had that was adjoining, and the road manager was on the other side in another suite that was adjoining. I had gotten Jimmy Haley's guitar. I borrowed it. I asked him, so I'm in that room, and I'm just baiting the heck out of this Martin. I hear this knock, knock, knock. And Roy says, "Mike, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm just on practice." He said, "Well, come on in." So I came in, we got a couple beers, and he's sitting there, he's teaching me some guitar licks and stuff and everything.
Very nice.
Roy was the most, I tell you, I saw him play stuff. What people probably don't realize was not only was he a master of country, he could play country, he could play rock, he could play classical, he could play jazz. I mean, he was all over that thing. He'd play a 12-string ovation and play Malagueña. And every night I watched him do that. I was just so amazed at, fast, accurate, and burning it. And Under the Double Eagle, for all you country fans, that was another one he did with the 12-string. But he was just such an incredible individual. But that night, we were talking, and gradually, his road manager pilot came in. We were talking, he was playing guitar and just talking a little bit. Then the band would show up, knock on the door. Then the backup singers, the girls, would come in. And he sat there and he would preach from the Bible. He got his Bible out and he'd read Ecclesiastics. To everything, there's a season, time for this, time for that. That was his favorite. And we would literally have Bible sessions. He was really, and sometimes he got to where he was kind of preaching on stage a little bit too. Not subtly. You gotta love one another. This world's getting, you need to find, not heavy religion, but he'd preach love and, patience and perseverance and all that kind of stuff from the stage. It was incredible. He was just an incredible individual. Probably my favorite, or one of them. There were so many good ones.
Yeah, and that's the thing. People say, "Well, who have you worked with? In all your years, my 44 years of doing this." And I was like, I thought that was a great question. So I actually put together a list, and it took me forever to do this list because then I'd remember another one, then another one. This list is double side, two rows on each page, and it's like 7 pages long now.
Well, I got about 40 or 50 on my wall in there. That's all I can put up.
Yeah, and I'm probably at a couple hundred now.
Yeah.
Of just different people and acts and performers and stuff, and I've missed a bunch of them because I've done a lot of these, music Mexicana shows and stuff, and I have no idea who some of those performers were and stuff like that. So, I mean, if I did that, I'd even more. It's just amazing how many performers you work. You don't even think about it. You think, oh, I've worked with a few of them, and then you find out how many you've actually worked with, and it's like, holy crud, where did the time go? I guess it's right there.
That's it. The one thing I've learned is that, and for all you young people, the more memories you can make, the experiences that you experience, that's what you're going to be left with when you're 70 or 80 or 90 years old. I bet you a lot of those memories of what you did in theater are going to come back, and that's going to be a great relief, because you'll think of like some of these stories I've mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of them, but it's a comfort. I'm retired, and a lot of my time is playing guitar, etc. This, that, and everything. But a great deal of it is remembering the crews I worked with, how close we were, the fun, the tragedies. Some tragedy, fortunately, not a lot, but there's been some. Theater's something you've got to be very careful with what you're doing. For all you people that are interested in theater, it's something you need to be very careful about. You can get hurt real easy.
Yep. Heavy stuff is moving quite often on a stage, and it's moving in the dark, or floors are opening up to move pieces.
Elevators are dropping.
Yeah, so you can get hurt very easily if you're not paying attention all the time.
Yep.
Well, good. From the Frontier.
Frontier.
Where'd you go?
One of my contacts, Ed McDonald, that I met in Lake Tahoe, one of the Tahoe boys, was the entertainment director of your hotel, the Las Vegas Hilton. Remember?
Well, that was back in the 90s, but
yes.
you had a stop at this place called the Riviera.
Oh, I forgot about the Riv.
And that's where I want to go to next. But we're gonna stop right here before we get to the Riviera, and then where Mike and I finally met. But we're going to do that on the next episode. But we're going to stop here, and this is the Craig L. Hay Show, and I want to thank Mike Criswell for doing the first episode, and he's also going to do the second episode. So until then, keep hanging in there and think and pass it on.
Did that go good?
How'd you like it?
Yeah.
Did you feel good on it?
I feel a lot better. I was nervous as hell. I thought, oh, what am I going to talk about? Well, once you get started, it's hard to shut up.
I can get it out of you by just hitting, because I've known you for a while, and I've known a lot of these stories, and you've told me a bunch of this stuff, so I know where I'm going to go back and grab you and bring you to it.
Yeah.
So just give me a minute here. I gotta